Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology, creator of the Salesology prospecting method. I'm also known as the queen of cold calling. Today, my very special guest is Jeff Peterson, and he is a sales manager with Liberty Diversified. And Jeff knows B2B selling. He's got more than 15 years of experience as a sales executive and a sales manager, primarily with both local and national linen and uniform companies and in the packaging industry. He has a track record of delivering industry-leading results in competitive markets. While still having boots on the ground in sales management, he has shared his empathetic, value-based sales and marketing approach through numerous publications, consultations, and engagements. Jeff is a husband. He has 4 kids, and in his increasingly rare time, he enjoys a great restaurant, live music, playing tennis, and getting himself into adventures exploring new cities and towns. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy that you are here. And I'm kind of curious, how did you end up being a sales manager at Liberty Diversified? Let's begin at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I started like many people do. I got out of college and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I had a journalism degree, which, I think is worth probably, I think my job offers coming out of college were worth less than what I was making like bartending at the time. So it wasn't exactly, a very worthwhile endeavor in college for me. So I got out. I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do. And, just like many people, I was fortunate. I happened to know someone who got me into a sales job that I was not qualified for. I mean, I had no idea if I could sell or not. But he, to his credit, and he did this for a lot of people, his name was Mike Shear. He was kind of my mentor. He saw something in me that told him that I could sell. So I started out with very little training. My training was go knock on 30 doors a day and put them into CRM, which at the time we were still using sheets and things like that. So, I spent about 6 months not knowing what I was doing. Eventually, we all kind of learned and grew together, me and the rest of the team I was at. This was in the linen and uniform world. It was a lot of hunting, all prospecting, no account management component, just strictly new business. And yeah, whatever. I sold for a couple of years. I gradually built and had some success. As it happens in many organizations, my boss got promoted from manager to director. At that time, I became the sales manager, received very little training for that, and had to figure it out my own ways. And, over the course of the last 15 years or so, I've just tried to keep learning and develop my own philosophies and theories. And, to whatever degree it's worked is why I'm sitting here talking to you today. It's been a journey. It's been a lot of mistakes, some success, a lot of failures, but just always trying to continue to learn and grow and develop. And then, passing that on to people that are under my purview. That's kind of been how I've made my career.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I actually have 2 questions. My first question is, what do you think it was that your mentor saw in you that he said, Jeff, you should try this?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I'm pretty sure I was a waiter at the time. So it's not like there was a lot of professional background to speak of. I don't know. I think being curious, being articulate, just really empathetic. I think some of that EQ, to whatever degree I possess it, was things that he saw in me that I hadn't necessarily that hadn't crystallized for me internally yet. And, it takes a really gifted individual to do that. So I have to give a lot of credit to him, because I don't necessarily know that I would have ever gotten into sales if he wouldn't have said, you can do this, I think. And from there, I just felt obligated. Okay, this guy took a chance on me. I know my resume is not worth anything it's not worth the paper it's printed on, right? So that really sparked a lot of motivation in me to prove him right, because I felt indebted to the fact that he stuck his neck out for me. And then when I didn't have immediate success right away, which a lot of people in hunting roles don't when they're first starting out, I know that now, but at the time I didn't. So it really put the impetus on me to learn and grow. And we had some corporate training over time that was okay, but we were reading books at this time. We were, getting into the sales thought leader pioneers at the time, the Jeff Gittimers, the Challenger sale, the Sandler selling. We were talking about all that stuff. And I think that curiosity, that innate desire to actually want to be passionate about our craft really helped all of us, and it certainly helped me.
Okay, because this kind of leads me to my second question. And from what you said when you were talking about your background, it kind of sounded like you got no training. You were just thrown into it. But now I'm hearing you say there was...
on day one, literally, it was like, go out and cold call, right? The training we sort of built out because we recognized it as a deficiency. So a lot of that, we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants on, but we knew that we had to take that sales was a craft to be taken seriously. It wasn't just something that you could pretend to do and have a lot of success. I mean, we knew that we took it upon ourselves to learn more than it was directed at us. And that's something I look for in salespeople to this day is this person going to be motivated to improve, or do I have someone who thinks they know it all? And believe me, the last thing that I thought when I got in this was that I knew it all. I was having major imposter syndrome because I knew nothing. So I knew that I had to learn something, or it wasn't going to be a very long-lived career.
Okay. So as somebody that now manages salespeople, and I believe you had told me previously that you manage 6, where does training fit in your model of hiring and managing people?
It's a great question. I think that training and onboarding more than just training, just a systematic, regimented onboarding process is very critical to having a long-term success with a sales hire. So, it really depends on what I'm getting. I mean, because I try and customize them to some degree based on the level of expertise. If I have somebody that's a veteran, has industry experience, knows the lay of the land, that process may be significantly different than someone who I've just hired based on a profile or a fit and may not have that. So my process is adaptable, but ultimately it's covering the same beats, and there's an absolute systematic approach to each individual. I don't have, and I've never had, to where I've got, 10 people I'm onboarding at one time and I have to put them all through the exact same process or else they're all going to get lost. I'm able, based on I'm usually hiring one person at a time, to really think critically about what that looks like for that person. And that's what I try and do. Usually we're doing about an 8-week onboarding process. A lot of supervised doing is a big component to that. I don't necessarily love to sit here and speak or lecture or, really tell people what to do. I like to sort of guide and then oversee and watch them sort of put their own spin on it, because everybody's going to do things a lot differently and there's a lot of gray area in this world. So I try to tap into that and let everybody feel comfortable with how they're doing it, but just with a lot of oversight at first.
Okay. So one of the questions that I asked you in preparation for doing this interview, I asked you about wins that you and your sales team have had in the past year. And you told me, first of all, that most of your team is new.
Yeah.
And, but you said they've really embraced the challenge of prospecting. And you got at the time that you wrote it, which was a few weeks ago, got a new customer that should be worth $300K annual opportunity. That's 1.2 million annually, you said.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about your prospecting process.
Yeah, it's interesting. This industry, the packaging industry, can be an order-taking account management industry if you let it, from what I've seen. And because it's hard to move and the customers tend to be fairly sticky, it gets really easy to be complacent when it comes to prospecting and not look for those new revenue opportunities. So coming from a linen and uniform world, that was a big change for me, where the entire mission there was to take customers who were spending $0 with us and get them to spend something with us. Now, in this case, sometimes customers are already spending a lot of money with us and we want them to spend more. Sometimes we're trying to protect our business from a competitor, so we're having to do a lot of retention type of activities that are more on the account management side. So if you're inundated with those, it can be hard to treat prospecting as a priority. So and culturally, to some degree, that's sort of what we had when I arrived, was a culture that hadn't necessarily sought a lot of outside business, and a new team that didn't necessarily know how to go about attracting it. So we really had to go back to the basics as far as walking indoors and really utilizing CRM to keep track of leads and we get 0 inbound leads. So this is all just stuff that we're scrounging around for. So we're really doing a lot of the old school boots on the ground type of prospecting right now. A lot of phone and email outreach, a lot of physical cold calling, and really just instilling that mindset was something that my team really took and ran with it to their credit. They didn't necessarily know how to do it, but what I really appreciated and loved about it was they really embraced that as a challenge. And we talk a lot in our meetings and in our one-on-ones about how do we develop a pipeline? How do we take customers or prospects that are spending no dollars with us and get them to spend something, get their attention, and show our value offerings and all that. So a lot of it's just been really. It's been fun. It's been kind of a boot camp, just as far as I'm taking blank slates and getting them to be hunters.
Okay, because we had a very interesting conversation when we first met, and I asked you. You had told me that traditionally the sales roles had been both hunter and farmer. One person playing both roles and mostly farming.
Yeah.
And that you're trying to change that. So
yeah.
I'm curious, why do you want to change that?
Because I think new revenue is the lifeblood to any organization. And certainly when you're talking about a production, manufacturing type of account, if all you're doing is, if you're not ever adding revenue, then it can really only go one direction. And generally thriving organizations don't like that direction. So if nothing else, it provides a lot of security and a lot of oversight in case we do lose some customers, whether it's to a competitor, whether they go out of business, because the economic climate can be what it is. First of all, you have to kind of maintain a baseline, and new revenue does that to some degree. And then it's hard to really, it's hard to grow without new customers. And we're in such a specialized, our prospect list is not so overwhelming. I mean, we can't sell our packaging solutions to everybody. We're looking at a very niche window, right? And there's a really specific targeted type of customer that makes sense for us. So there's really no excuse not to prospect to them, because it's not an endless list like it is in some industries. So we can be very targeted. We can be very strategic. We can be very regimented. And really it's about forming habits. And that's kind of what I was tasked with. And, it's very much still an ongoing process, but I've been very pleased with our prospecting efforts over the last 6-7 months.
Okay. So I'm switching gears a little bit here, because you had mentioned getting your people to use CRM. And one of the things I hear a lot from sales managers or business owners that are managing a team is just how darn hard it is to get salespeople to use the CRM.
Yeah.
So what's your secret? What's your secret?
I don't know that I have the secret. So spoiler alert to whatever this answer becomes, but there is no magic bullet that I found. But what I have had some success with, organizations can use CRM in many different ways, as you know, as a marketing tool, as a accountability tool, or as a sales development tool, right? Some organizations like CRM because it gives executives just a quote unquote pipeline for how they can project revenue out and make smart decisions about what's coming in. That doesn't really move the needle for salespeople. If you tell them that's why they're needing to enter things in CRM, it doesn't motivate them. You can also use it to track activity and the number of appointments and the number of outreaches and the number of emails sent. And that's a micromanagement tool. It has value if need be, especially if you've got an individual rep that's struggling, but that's also not going to motivate them. So as a sales enablement tool, it's about the only modicum of success that I've found. And that's by showing how the CRM can actually work to generate leads to their pipeline, make their lives easier. The things that it can do from an email marketing perspective, from a pipeline and opportunity management perspective, it can help them prioritize tasks. It can help them work more efficiently, make more informed decisions about who to call on, generally help them with organization, which is something a lot of salespeople struggle with, and allow them more free time to actually be dynamic and solve problems for customers and, really just liberate their calendars. So when I'm speaking to its benefits to a sales rep, I'm focused on that. It's still very much a mixed bag. I've never had 100% buy-in amongst a team. I've always had some degree of people who really love it and embrace it and others who don't. And it can be hard to break through that. And I think for sales leaders, it's not, it's really how much can you tolerate, right? Are you going to terminate a President's Club level sales rep because their CRM isn't quite up to snuff? I've never been willing to do that in my career. So I need to be honest with myself about that. So that way my expectations can be in check. And, it's just one of those things where everybody needs to be treated fairly, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to be treated equally. I feel very much that way about CRM. I'd love to give the corporate speech about how everybody is on the same page and needs to use it, but that's not really how I manage to it. If anything, I allow people that have proven that they're producers and they're top-notch rep, but everything else is buttoned down, a bit more grace on it than somebody who's struggling already.
Well, one thing I would add to your list of reasons to use the CRM as a salesperson is that you really don't want to screw up or miss out on an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And speaking as somebody who has done that because she did not put the notes in the CRM, it's really, once you do that, typically, once you make that mistake, you typically don't make it again. But it's
no question about it.
Yeah.
And those tasks and the reminders that you can set for yourself as an individual rep, I'd argue that's just as important, if not more, than like any sort of pipelining. Just being able to not lose sight of those deals and those opportunities. And if somebody told you to call on them in June, so you put in the reminder to call on them in June, if you don't have that somewhere, things are going to come up. It'll slip through the cracks on you. I'm the same as you. It's certainly happened to me.
Right. And you cannot do this on an Excel spreadsheet or with your notebook. Let's just be clear. It can't happen.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't need to happen. There's better ways to do it. You should embrace them.
Yeah. And there are I think the thing that some salespeople really don't like, some CRMs are more cumbersome than others. And so you want to find one that's a little bit easier to use.
Yeah. And I think what happens for a lot of organizations is they're sold an entire suite of software from an IT company, and the CRM is usually kind of a throw-in. It's not something that whoever makes decisions on those things wants to necessarily think about a lot. oh, the sales team won't use it anyway, we might as well do it. I know that's how a lot of those decisions get made, and they're not always made with the sales department's best interest in mind, weirdly, in organizations. So sometimes you have to play the hand you're dealt a little bit on it. And as a sales leader, it's our job, to get the buy-in on that. We don't always get handed. I've been handed some really bad CRM systems. I really have. And then the other thing that happens is people want to make them look robust, so they put a lot of garbage in there. They'll buy a list. They'll say, oh, we've got 15,000 records in CRM. It's like, okay, but how many of those are real? I don't like that either. I'd rather have a finite number of real records and contacts and information than some big burdensome list of a bunch of stuff that might be nonsense.
Agreed.
So we tend to build ours organically. That's what I do. I'm okay with starting with 0 records if I have to, and putting them in one at a time until I have something that works. And I don't really care how long that takes. I'd rather do that than data dump a bunch of records that I'm not going to work, that may or may not be applicable to our industry, and not be able to build a robust prospect list. It's just not worth it to me.
Well, then the other thing happens if you've dumped a bunch of contacts into your CRM is that they end up getting tasked to somebody, whether they're good or not.
Correct.
So, and if they're not good, then that somebody is wasting a lot of time.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
I agree. Yeah. We tend to enter manually and make sure that we know it's solid before we put it in as a lead.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to ask you another question, because in preparing for this interview, another question that I asked you was, what drives you crazy about managing a sales team? And I thought your answer was very interesting, because it wasn't really about the sales team, it was about you. So I'm just going to read what you wrote. It said, my biggest weakness or struggle is balancing my attitude between being pragmatic and realistic, while also trying to maintain a culture of enthusiasm and buy-in. You don't want to tell your team that it's sunny when it's clearly pouring down rain, but at the same time, you can't allow them to become jaded and disillusioned about the struggles and the challenges that they may be feeling, many of which are out of their control. So I have to be very cognizant of my demeanor, and it can be a fine line to walk between commiseration and empathy and hurting the team through my tone and attitude. So could you share more about
a really
that?
good answer. I don't know what I was feeling that day, but I needed to go to my therapist when I wrote that, but what I meant, I think, is, sometimes there are headwinds operationally with other departments in an organization. Sometimes the competition can just have a leg up on you in some way that can be making the sales process harder. Sometimes there are just a lot of internal things that maybe your organization isn't quite functioning as well as it could be in other departments, and that's impacting sales, right? So as a leader, it's really a fine line to walk, because you want to shoot people straight, and you want to, enable them and give them all the tools that they can, both from a mentality standpoint and from a pragmatic standpoint, to do their job well and to hit their numbers and to reach their goals. And when, there are factors that are maybe out of their control, certainly, or my control, that are impacting that, it's hard to balance, shooting someone straight, but also not making them in a worse place mentally, so they feel like they don't have the confidence to go out and sell. And that's sort of, I think, what I probably struggle with the most as a leader. It's like you want people to trust you. You don't want to lie to them. You don't want to tell them, I think what I said, that it's raining when it's sunny outside, or, it's a tough line to walk. So that's something that I struggle with, because, as a leader, you are responsible for the overall tone and culture and demeanor and attitude. You want to instill that in a positive way in your department, but you also risk losing your credibility if you're not realistic with your subordinates. So trying to manage that is something that I struggle with to this day.
Thank you for
Does that make
sharing
sense?
that. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because I know. I mean, we are recording this interview in January, and I know many organizations at either at the end of the year or the beginning of the new year, they'll have these like sales kickoff meetings that lots of times are telling everybody that it's really sunny when it's actually been raining, and kind of beating up all the salespeople and giving them pep talks. They have to do more. They have to do more. They have to do more.
Yeah.
And that, to my way of thinking, is not a really helpful thing to be doing. But a lot of organizations seem to do that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. When I meet with my sales team collectively and there's an issue that is impacting us all, I try to be as transparent as I can of what I'm feeling about it, what I'm experiencing about it. I don't want to dwell on it. I don't want to be negative about it, but I want to give them honest information. And then I like to end it with, after I've delivered the piece of news that may or may not be, that's generally bad, I try and come up with a solution around that, or, a realistic timeline for overcoming it, or whatever the case may be. I always try and end it with a takeaway that'll hopefully spin it back to an opportunity, to varying degrees of success sometimes. But, I'm really mindful of what mentality can do for an individual sales producer. And I can't let them walk out of a situation feeling so discouraged, they're not going to want to be motivated to go out. They don't believe in what we're offering. They think a competitor is just going to keep kicking our butts. Like, I don't want them leaving with that mentality. So I try and come up with a solution, or at least, if nothing else, maybe a timeline for when I think we'll be able to see some improvement or some new innovations that we have coming down the pipe. So at least they know that, yes, now might not be great, but we've got, there's something that's coming that may help. And that's the best I can do, I think.
Well, certainly salespeople, if there are problems within the organization or the market or whatever it is, it's not like they don't know this. They may not know the details, but if it's impacting them, they're aware of it.
For sure.
So talking about it honestly and transparently seems like a much better idea than pretending everything's great if it's not great.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe some of the personal development I've done is, I think earlier in my career I maybe would have been quick to minimize, and I don't find that helps. I think meeting people where they're at is pretty important.
Agreed. So, Jeff, if people want to get in touch with you, because this has been a great conversation, so if people want to get in touch with you, want to connect with you, want to ask you questions, want to talk to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I just find me on LinkedIn. I try and I write a lot of content on there. I'm experimenting with some video stuff heading into 2025. So, by probably April of 2025, I'll hopefully have some videos up. And I just find me on LinkedIn, Jeff Peterson, sales manager. I'm based in Omaha, Nebraska. And look for my articles. I usually try and write 1 or 2 a month. I think that's how you found me initially, Wendy. So thank you for that. And thank you for reaching out, for the opportunity to come on and talk sales and sales management with you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you could do this interview today. And for those of you that did not have a chance to grab a pen and write down everything that Jeff just said, you're in luck, because the link to Jeff's LinkedIn profile is in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link, and you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, connect with me on there. I connect with everybody, so I'm happy to always happy to meet people.
Yes, that's where we met. So
absolutely.
So thank you, our listeners today. You have been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, with my very special guest, Jeff Peterson. He is a sales manager at Liberty Diversified with a whole bunch of interesting things to say about how to manage a sales team. And if you found value in listening to today's podcast, then please think about one business owner, one sales leader, one sales manager, somebody that you know that you think might also find value in listening to this podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.